Good morning. I begin with a common refrain. The United States faces its most dangerous threat environment since World War II. However, though many of our national security challenges mirror the 1930s, warfare looks much different today. Technological advances in artificial intelligence, hypersonic strike weapons, sixth-generation aircraft, and space-based weapons are transforming the nature of modern conflict. The Department of the Air Force is on the front lines of these changes. Today, we will hear from three representatives of that service. We welcome Secretary Troy Mink, General Chance Saltzman, and General David Alvin. I thank all of them for being here and for their continued service to the nation. The committee understands that the fiscal year 2026 President's budget is not yet complete, and we are therefore aware that the three witnesses before us do not have the full budget picture. That being said, their testimony is still vital. It will help us consider how to support the mission of the Air Force and the Space Force, which is to be lethal and ready to fight tonight, as the slogan goes. One of our most pressing responsibilities is to ensure the long-term readiness and modernization of the Air Force. In the event of war, we need not only capability, but also capacity. If we go to war in 2027, we will fight with the Air Force we have today, which is a mix of fourth-generation fighters, such as the F-15E, F-16, and fifth-generation fighters, the F-22 and F-35. We need more fighter aircraft now, and we are working, along with our colleagues in the House, Chairman Rogers, to keep the F-15EX line open through our reconciliation bill. Even as we plan for future systems, we must address the state of today's fleet. The mission capability rates across many Air Force platforms remains unacceptably low. Some platform fleets are frequently less than 50% mission capable, and we'll have questions about that. The F-35 fleet is available a mere 54% of the time. This is not just a maintenance issue, it is a readiness issue, and it impacts our ability to deter adversaries and respond when necessary. Taxpayers are investing billions of dollars to support these aircraft, and our airmen and our citizens deserve higher readiness levels to defend our national interest. I expect our witnesses to provide a frank assessment of what is driving these poor rates, and more importantly, what is being done to reverse the trend. The Air Force also plays a key role in modernizing our nuclear forces. The service is responsible for two legs of the nuclear triad, as well as a majority of the U.S. nuclear command, control, and communication system. These programs must stay on schedule to deliver the essential capabilities we need to deter nuclear threats. We cannot afford to allow these programs to flounder because of a lack of leadership and prioritization. This committee expects accountability among program managers and transparency with Congress to ensure we can modernize effectively. And I think this panel shares that sentiment. I look forward to hearing our witnesses explain how the Air Force manages these risks while preserving strategic stability. The U.S. Space Force has grown significantly in the last 5 years. That trend should continue because our threats are growing as well. Maintaining space superiority is a no-fail mission. Increased investment in this young service is absolutely vital. We also must invest in the facilities that support our service members. In the 2025 NDAA, this committee unanimously adopted a provision that requires the service to maintain a minimum 4% plant replacement value for infrastructure. That provision survived conference and was signed into law by the President. It is the law of the land. Let me say this again. This is the law of the land, and senior leaders should set the example to the force by following the law, a law that was created, I must point out, because the services had long ignored the problem. We cannot make progress on any of these issues without those who wear the uniform and support the mission every day. Our airmen, guardians, and civilians are our greatest asset. Recruiting and retention continue to be major challenges, and we need to remain focused on supporting service members and their families with the resources, care, and career opportunities they deserve. I look forward to the hearing and the testimony from each of our witnesses about how they intend to ensure the Department of the Air Force has what it needs to meet today's challenges, maintain our superiority in air and space, and prepare for the threats we face on the horizon. With that, I turn to my colleague, Ranking Member Reed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Mink, General Alvin, General Saltzman, welcome to this hearing. Thank you for your leadership, and please share the committee's gratitude to all the men and women who you lead in the Department of the Air Force and the Space Force. The air and space domains grow more complicated by the day, even as our forces continue to fly and operate the finest aircraft and space assets in the world. Our adversaries, in particular China, Russia, and Iran, are developing their own cutting-edge air defense systems, aircraft, missiles, and satellites. The capability of such weapons is evident, as we saw only last month when a number of American F-16s and an F-35 experienced close calls from Houthi air defense fire over Yemen. Additionally, just 1 year ago, Iran launched a large-scale attack against Israel, and many feared significant destruction. However, dozens of American F-15 fighters intercepted more than 70 drones and missiles, and Israeli and U.S. Navy air defense systems shot down hundreds more. The U.S. Space Force provided critical intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance information, as well as command and control capabilities. 99% of Iran's missiles were shot down, a strong demonstration of America's air and space-based kill chain. Despite these formidable capabilities, however, the Department of the Air Force will need to quickly evolve its technologies to keep pace with and outstrip our rivals. To that end, the committee looks forward to receiving and reviewing the President's defense budget request for fiscal year 2026. I urge the White House to deliver that as soon as possible. Secretary Mink, the Air Force has spent the past several years modernizing a number of capabilities, including the Bomber Force, the Ground-Based Intercontinental Ballistic Missile Force, the Advanced Battle Management System Program, and several unmanned aircraft systems. But modernization can only be successful if the Air Force appropriately balances its legacy platforms against new priorities, including uncrewed systems. Secretary Mink, I would ask for an update on how you are addressing this challenge. General Alvin, the Air Force recently announced the Boeing F-47 as the winner of the Next Generation Air Dominance Program. Although production is several years away, I would like to know what capability gaps you intend the F-47 to fill and how you envision the service employing this aircraft. In addition, the Air Force's success in the coming decades will be shaped by its ability to acquire and control data. The Air Force must be able to detect, analyze, and act on information across the battle space quickly using automation, artificial intelligence, and predictive analytics. The committee would appreciate an update on these and other programs that are receiving increased emphasis and resourcing. General Saltzman, Congress established the Space Force in order to consolidate the numerous space activities in the Department of Defense. Given that the Space Force is only 5 years old, I understand it is still becoming institutionalized within the department, and there are many challenges in that process. I would like to know how you are growing the service in terms of personnel and structures like the Space Development Agency, and how you are working to foster a service culture that can succeed in the dramatically evolving space environment. Finally, the President has directed the Department of Defense to develop a so-called Golden Dome to defend the U.S. homeland against missile threats. So far, details for this initiative have been scarce, but I understand the concept will rely heavily on space-based detection and warning systems. I would ask each of you, our witnesses, to explain your respective roles in the Golden Dome program and how you plan to shift resources to accommodate it. Secretary Mink, General Alvin, and General Saltzman, thank you again for appearing today, and I look forward to your testimony. Thank you.
Gentlemen, the three of you have submitted written testimony consisting of 18 pages. Rather than ask each of you to read 6 pages at a time, I'll ask, how do you propose to proceed on opening statements. General Alvin.
Chairman, I'm happy to hear. I have an opening statement I can read, or we can defer that and get to questions.
Oh, no, let's, so you're all three prepared to make opening statements, and General Alvin, you are recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Chairman Wicker, Ranking Member Reed, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. I'd also like to extend a warm welcome to our new Secretary of the Air Force, Dr. Troy Mink, and express my appreciation to the committee for supporting his confirmation. The Department of the Air Force will be well-served under his leadership. Today, I'm proud to represent the 677,000 total force airmen serving the nation. I want to thank you for your support, not only for those airmen, but for their families. I'd also like to express my immense pride in the exemplary performance of our airmen in securing our homeland and deployed worldwide. From the Indo-Pacific to the Middle East to our southern border, they are working around the clock to deliver air power anytime, anywhere to protect the United States. The strategic landscape has shifted dramatically. We now operate in a world where the PRC is not only rapidly modernizing its military, but is doing so with a clear intent to coerce its neighbors and reshape the international order to include a PRC nuclear breakout that demands unmatched deterrence capabilities. In parallel, we're seeing unprecedented threats to our homeland. These converging pressures make one thing clear. The U.S. must maintain air power dominance if we're to safeguard our security, deter aggression, and prevail in conflict. This is not just a future challenge, it is today's reality. To achieve peace through strength, we must adapt and evolve. Reinforced by our most recent interim national defense strategic guidance, our Air Force has three enduring priorities. First, we must defend our homeland. Air and missile threats are evolving in both speed and sophistication. The ability to detect, track, and defeat those threats in real time is foundational to our national defense and is non-negotiable. Simultaneously, the United States Air Force provides a reliable, effective, and safe nuclear deterrent that is the backbone of strategic stability. These priorities are paramount, cannot fail, and must be given equal weight. Finally, we must project power globally, either independently or as part of the joint force, to rapidly respond anywhere to deter aggression and win. This is what makes our Air Force unique and what is needed now more than ever. To achieve these priorities, we are asking for sustained support and modernization and the development of new capabilities. The FY26 budget request is designed to build a force aligned with today's operational realities. That means preserving current readiness and optimizing our force design tailored for contested environments and one that blends next-generation aircraft, autonomous systems, and resilient command and control. Our modernization efforts to rebuild our military include the continued development of the F-47, the integration of collaborative combat aircraft, and other possibilities to expand combat mass at lower cost. We're also upgrading the F-35 and F-15 to keep pace with evolving threats. These platforms are critical not just to maintain parity, but to retain the edge that our warfighters need. At the same time, we are recapitalizing aging fleets essential for maintaining power projection in the interim. Our investment in nuclear modernization remains top priority, with funding directed toward the Sentinel program, B-21 radar, and the revitalized B-52 fleet. These systems will anchor our strategic deterrence for decades to come. Equally as important is the investment in our airmen. We're enhancing recruiting, expanding training opportunities, and strengthening family support structures. We suffered a recruiting setback due to the year-long continuing resolution and a subsequent reduction of nearly $500 million in our military personnel account. This will result in our inability to fund the recruitment of 3,000 Americans who want to join our Air Force. Furthermore, and particularly, Mr. Chairman, at odds with your opening statement about the increased investment we need in facilities, sustainment restoration, and modernization, because of the reduced budget triggered by the CR, we had to decrease our FSRM account by $642 million just to remain solvent. This directly affects the quality of life for our airmen, and we must find a better way going into the future. We don't just need a more Air Force, we need a more capable one. We need more tooth, less tail, a force that can deliver rapid, decisive blows and reposition quickly for the next fight. That means divesting from aging systems and unused infrastructure while investing in platforms and people that enhance our warfighting capacity. More means more options for the nation, enhanced homeland defense, strengthened deterrence, and unmatched power projection. It means a force that is strategically postured to deny adversaries. No other service can match what the Air Force delivers. Effects anywhere on the globe, at any scale, on minimal notice. Our airmen are the best in the world, ready to win today and build the enduring force for tomorrow. With your support, we can ensure the Air Force remains the cornerstone of American power through the 21st century. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, General Alvin. Let's go to General Saltzman next. Sir, you're recognized.
Chairman Wicker, Ranking Member Reed, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the continued support and for the opportunity to testify on the Space Force's posture for FY26. Never before in our history has space been more critical to the future of our nation. Satellites underpin our economic prosperity, enabling everything from transportation and communication to agriculture and finance. Space has likewise become the backbone of our national security, and today's joint force is built around the assumption that space power will be there when needed. GPS allows our forces to mass and maneuver fires. Satellite communications ensure global C2 of operations. Satellites offer constant vigilance on the battlefield, alerting America's forces of missile launches and adversary actions. All of these effects and more are provided by the U.S. Space Force. With about 3% of the DoD budget and less than 1% of the personnel, the Space Force is a great value proposition for the department. For this tiny fraction of resources, you enable a service that has become indispensable to modern power projection. However, despite the dramatic rise in threats and increasing importance of space, over the last few budget cycles, the Space Force has experienced shrinking resources. This disconnect between value and investment creates risk for our nation. Further exacerbating the situation, the Space Force has been asked to accept new responsibilities and missions, forcing tough choices between delayed readiness, reduced capacity, and unaddressed vulnerabilities. To illustrate my point, in the past 3 years, the Space Force has been asked to take on new missions like ground and air-moving target indications and adding new space control capabilities. We are taking on additional responsibilities associated with modeling and simulation, force design analytics, and a threefold increase in launch tempo at our national spaceports, along with new advanced training requirements. These requirements have driven the need for increases in end-strength, military construction, new education and training curriculum, and expanded information technology requirements. The most recent addition in our mission set is the space-based technology associated with the Golden Dome program, which will depend heavily on Space Force sensors, data fusion, and communication capabilities. These are not modernization efforts or shifts from legacy mission. They represent new and emerging requirements for missions that have never before been accomplished by military space organizations. These new mission areas will require new and stable resources over time to deliver. In FY26, we will have developed the blueprints and laid the foundational groundwork to continue these efforts in earnest. If the resources are made available, the Space Force will be postured to use them effectively in pursuit of these critical priority missions. Space gives us an incredible strategic advantage, but any advantage can become a vulnerability when held at risk. In the future, defending the homeland will demand that we first defend the satellites that make that defense possible. To be successful in this effort, we must be able to control the space domain, protecting our capabilities in space while denying an adversary the ability to use space against us. That, in essence, is why we have a Space Force. It is the job of a military service to achieve superiority in its domain, and that's what we do for space. But if we want a force that can secure our nation's interests in, from, and to space, we must resource it accordingly. In pursuit of this mission imperative, my priorities have remained consistent: build comprehensive domain awareness, deploy resilient mission architectures, and develop the capacity to hold an adversary's space assets at risk. To enhance our situational awareness, we are investing in additional sensors, data fusion capabilities, and the networks to rapidly put this information in decision-makers' hands. To assure our missions are resilient to attack, we are investing in proliferated constellations. We are investing in launch infrastructure to ensure steady and cost-effective deployment of capabilities. And we are developing protective measures for our satellites and networks. And finally, to hold an adversary's space assets at risk, we are investing in counterspace systems designed to defeat any attempt to use space capabilities to target our forces or our homeland. Because of the work we have already done, additional resources given to the Space Force will enable accelerated delivery and expanded capacity in each of these areas. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss the Space Force's FY26 posture. Our guardians stand at the forefront of the newest warfighting domain. With the support of this committee, I am confident the Space Force will hold the line and advance our national advantage in space. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, General Saltzman. Secretary Mink.
Chairman Wicker, Ranking Member Reed, and distinguished committee members, General Alvin, General Saltzman, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to talk today. And personally, I'd like to give my sincere thanks for the support during the hearing process, and glad to be back here so soon. The Department of the Air Force is at an inflection point. We are engaging in a fast-paced race for technology superiority against a well-resourced strategic opponent. However, we simultaneously face personnel and platform challenges affecting our immediate readiness. We must balance our requirements to generate readiness and project power today with the imperative to rebuild our military and develop capabilities so that we can continue deterring our adversaries tomorrow. Our fiscal priorities are focused on addressing the balance between these realities and supporting United States national security objectives as outlined in interim national strategic guidance. The scope and severity of the threat to our homeland and national interests are significant and increasing. We now face one of the most dangerous security environments in our history. The Department of the Air Force has structured for a long-term strategy around belief that China is our pacing threat, and this reality directly influences the Department's fiscal priorities. China's defense budget has nearly doubled during the past 11 years, growing 6% annually on average. U.S. defense spending has grown around 3% over the same period, increasing below the inflation level over the last 5 years, and many of our ally partners' defense spending rates are even lower. These limitations have allowed China to start closing the gap in capabilities. Defending the homeland is the Department of the Air Force's top priority. We will do so by continuing to modernize our nuclear forces, especially through the Sentinel, B-21 long-range standoff weapon programs, as well as the nuclear command and control communication that support these systems. We are also eager to support the President's Golden Dome for America. While still in the conceptual stage, there is no question that the Department of the Air Force will have a significant role in this project. Our next priority is to deter China and others. We will do this through investing in our people, our readiness, and our posture within Indo-Pacific region. We believe that our people are and will continue to be our nation's key competitive advantage. We are working to train our airmen and guardians to confront the brutal challenges that warfare without sanctuary presents. We are emphasizing readiness standards by creating new inspections, assessments, and exercises geared towards preparing our personnel for this environment. Finally, we are strengthening our posture within the Indo-Pacific region, conducting high-level operational exercises that will attest our ability to deploy and operate in austere environments. Lastly, the Department of the Air Force is preparing to provide critical capabilities and forces to our joint warfighter in order to defeat our adversaries if deterrence fails. We will concentrate our efforts in two areas. First, in our ability to fight tonight, and second, in our ability to fight in the future. Through our current and future investment, the Department aims to establish a balanced high-low mix of combat capabilities, optimized to project power both from within and outside of adversary threat environments. The Department of the Air Force is also looking to streamline our force wherever possible. This includes finding creative ways to remove excess infrastructure and retire obsolete inventory. We also recognize our need and responsibility to pass an audit as soon as possible, and we are working to make that a reality. The Department of the Air Force is extremely proud of all of our airmen and guardians defending our nation and its interest every hour of every day. We commit to working with this committee to secure the FY26 budget request, which will directly support airmen and guardians and their uncompromising mission. We thank you for your time and look forward to your questions.
And we thank each of you for your testimony. Quick yes or no answer from each of you. Much of the funding in the Defense Reconciliation Bill will be unspecific because of House and Senate rules and will technically be at the discretion of the Department of Defense, though we will write recommendations for them. A quick yes or no from each of you. Do you commit to follow unequivocally the Congress's spending recommendations in defense reconciliation? General Alvin?
Yes.
Secretary Mink?
Yes, Chairman.
General Saltzman?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Now, General Alvin, you said a statement, you made a statement that I think I very much agree with. You said, got to be a better way. I think you were talking about then these frequent continuing resolutions, were you not?
Yes, Chairman, that was what I was referring to.
Okay, thank you very much about that. General Saltzman, I think you said the Space Force consumes 3%, about 3% of the defense budget. You're taking on additional responsibilities. I think you agree that those additional responsibilities are correctly directed toward the Space Force.
Yes, sir, I do.
And do you think the 3% in the next 5 to 10 years is going to remain a correct percentage of the overall national security budget?
I think that depends on what the denominator is, but I definitely think we need more resources in order to accomplish those new missions.
Okay. Now, General Alvin, let's talk about the F-47. And let's compare it to the development of the F-35. I understand there is a completely new acquisition approach. Don't take the full 3 minutes I have left, but what's the difference there, and how's this going to affect the taxpayer and the warfighter and national security?
Thank you, Chairman. I'll go as fast as I can because I could go on for about an hour.
Sure.
The primary difference is that we now have more of control over the project as it moves forward. We have insourced more. We have more of the ownership of the tech base. I've guided a government reference architecture, so we own the mission systems. And so others can come in and play, but we own the development, the upgrade. And so the upgrades can come at the speed of software, not hardware, can come at the speed of our engineers understanding how fast to advance versus dealing with the contractor and paying the extra cost.
All right, sir. This is a major change in approach, is it not?
100%, Chairman.
How's it going to affect the taxpayer? How's it going to affect the timeliness of this project?
Chairman, I think we're going to have some conversations about F-35 and how we don't want to repeat that. So it is going to affect the taxpayer. My sense is that we're going to be able to be more agile, and as more disruptive technology comes into play to be able to develop more advanced systems, we'll be able to more rapidly integrate them, not only into the F-47, but into those two collaborative combat aircraft, the YFQ-42 and the YFQ-44 that are currently under prototype. They're all going to be under the same mission systems architecture. So we won't just be upgrading one platform. We'll be upgrading a system, and so the American taxpayer will get more combat capability out of their money.
What do we mean by mission capability? And we're told there's some fairly poor numbers, 60% readiness rates for some of our aircraft. What do you mean by that, and how are we going to address that issue?
So mission capable rate, obviously you assess the missions for which it is designed and the aircrew are trained, whether that be air-to-air combat, air-to-ground, the certain capabilities. So the aircraft has to have the systems that are working that enables all those missions to happen. So when we say mission capable, it gets pretty detailed. There's fully mission capable, partial mission capable, non-mission capable.
Let's talk about the F-16. What's our capability rate?
The F-16
where it ought to be?
The F-16, for its age, I would say the F-16 is about where it ought to be for its age and is for its sophistication, because obviously the more complex the system, the tougher it is to keep up those mission systems.
But where is it?
The F-16, and I'm cheating because I don't have it all committed to memory, but the F-16 aircraft availability, which includes depot time, is now just about hovering around 50%. Now that deceives you a little bit because aircraft availability includes the time when it goes into the program depot. And so its mission capable rate is higher than that, and I can get that for you here. Let's see, I can actually right now. It's a 62% mission capable rate.
Okay. Well, you probably will want to supplement your answer there, but thank you very much. And Senator Reed, you're now recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, the Air Force is one of the most highly technical services and the Space Force together. And you have a workforce that is very talented and critical. The proposed reductions in the civilian workforce of the Department of Defense, are you anticipating losses, and will you be tracking those losses? Because you have people working for you that could walk out the door the next day and get a substantial job, and all these early retirements, et cetera, are complicating it. Your comments, please.
Yes, Senator, we are watching it, and yes, we do expect to lose personnel. We already are. You know, and just to reiterate your comments, that the technical skill base that the Air Force requires is always competitive, right? That is a very competitive skill base. That's why I think recruiting and retention activities, which I intend to focus quite a bit of my time on are going to be critical going forward, because it is a rapidly evolving environment, and we have to make sure we're recruiting the right talent. In the end, it's prioritization. Over my career, we've gone through a number of these ups and downs with respect to personnel. We have to prioritize and then make sure how we're doing our recruiting and retention and bringing on the new people are focused on the areas of priority and the
Thank
skill
you.
sets we need.
General Saltzman, again, you have a highly technical force, particularly with a significant number of civilians. Have you seen retirements and people leaving because they're uncertain of the climate?
We've certainly seen people leaving, a combination of incentives, deferred retirement program, resignation program, and others. We also were in a hiring freeze for some time. We were in a period of managed growth, and so there was a deficit when we were trying to get to a larger civilian workforce, and we were asked to stop and then offer some to resign early. Total reductions have been almost 14% of our civilian workforce inside the Space Force. Part of that is a result of having smaller numbers, and so, small numbers more drastically affect our percentages. But we understand the desire to reduce the civilian workforce. It's just having a little bit of an outsized impact on the Space Force.
Well, I would ask all of you, if you, in a particular agency, see a point where the civilian workforce is essentially reached the point of breaking, if you will, please, must alert us to that, because again, we're not going to do all these great scientific and developmental and modernization issues without these critical workers. General Saltzman, in your publication, United States Space Force Warfighting, A Framework for Planning, you lay out the very sophisticated offensive and defensive weapon systems that you need in the future. But do you agree that these systems should be the property of the Space Force, a Title X armed force, or because there's been some discussion of leasing pieces of equipment and things like that, so you would have, and perhaps a civilian-owned system in a kill chain, which raises some serious issues.
Yes, sir. We take very seriously our Title X responsibilities to wield military force. We believe those should be government systems, and we're actively going through an assessment process to determine precisely what are inherently governmental, inherently military functions that we would not want to contract out as commercial services. There's some fine lines there between the data that you use and how that data is acquired, and then how it's used in terms of targeting, et cetera. But we're trying to be very, very precise so that we retain governmental control for those things in the kill chain.
Thank you. General Alvin, could you estimate how much in cost facilities you have that you don't need and that you have to maintain? How much is that a year? Do you guess?
Senator Short, as far as the volume, we estimate we have at about 23% excess vertical infrastructure, buildings and structure, about 60% excess horizontal. So overall, the dollar value is about 30%. Our estimate, our rough estimate, is it costs us an additional maybe $1.5 billion a year just to be able to maintain that. And so that was sort of the source of my, I guess, ill-delivered issue on that. I'm not lamenting the Senate's very strong interest in making sure our airmen have a place to work and live that makes sense. It's the excess that we don't need, and it doesn't. I think there's probably some innovative solutions we can work on together, and I would love to see that at the enterprise level.
Well, thank you very much. I think you're right. I think we have to look at an innovative way to reduce these facilities, lower your costs, free up $1.5 billion perhaps in the Air Force, and put it back into quality of life or into systems. Thank you, gentlemen.
General Alvin, you can allow for that excess and still comply with the statute, can you not?
We must, because it is in law. Yes, absolutely, Chairman. Recognize that.
Thank you very much. Senator Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Mink, at your confirmation hearing, you committed to utilizing all available tools to accelerate Sentinel emplacement and ensure that our nation's ICBM capability does move forward. The Nunn-McCready review concluded that the continuation of Sentinel is essential to our national security. And thanks to the thoroughness of that review, we can make smarter changes to the program that will reduce the projected cost and schedule of the program. However, the Air Force needs to start making design decisions that will get us to milestone B. The longer you wait, the more likely it is that costs will increase. I also don't want to see the Air Force choose to raid Sentinel budget lines to pay for other programs because the Air Force has delayed milestone B decisions. So, Mr. Secretary, I know you've been in this position for all of about a week now, but next time you come before the committee, I would want to have a robust discussion on Sentinel's progress and the risks that we would incur if the program is arbitrarily delayed or underfunded. Also, sir, U.S. STRATCOM Commander General Cotton has recommended that the Air Force procure at least 145 B-21 bombers to meet his requirements as STRATCOM Commander. How do you intend to work with STRATCOM to understand these requirements and ensure that the Air Force procures enough B-21s so that we can meet that projected threat?
Thank you for the question, Senator. Just with respect to Sentinel, yes, ma'am. The 5th day into the job, I will be having my first deep dive into the Sentinel program. So this Friday, it's scheduled.
Great.
That'll just be a start. So yes, Senator, something we have to get on. Obviously, the number curve led to some restructuring of the program. What exactly that's going to be, I'll be working with the team, and I'm happy to get back with the committee when I get more detail on that. B-21, yes, Senator, I understand that General Cotton, and I do expect to be meeting with General Cotton soon, I hope, to discuss his entire portfolio, but B-21 is a big part of that. But the department, I understand the department is working with STRATCOM as well as Joint Staff and throughout the administration of the SecDef to help define what is that long-term required and do we need to increase beyond 100. So we are looking at that, and it is one of the areas. And thankfully, that is one of the programs that's actually executing pretty well within the department.
Right. The STRATCOM commander does have to express his needs, his requirements, so he can address the threats, and then it's up to the services to step forward and meet those requirements. Am I stating that correctly?
Into the Joint Staff, and then, yes, the service executes on that requirement.
Okay, thank you. General Saltzman, all of the other services are investing heavily in long-range fires, and as I've said many times, we can't shoot what we can't see. We are going to need to rely heavily on our space-based systems to track objects beyond the line of sight. How does Space Force work with your sister services to understand what space capabilities they will need to rely on so that they can close those kill chains?
Yes, ma'am. We were designated the Joint Space Requirements Integrator by the JROC on the Joint Staff, and one of the ways that we execute those responsibilities is we stood up a requirements integration cell in the J8 where all the services can put their requirements in, we vet them all, make sure there's proper attention given to each requirement, and there's not too much redundancy, but no gaps in the capabilities as well. Programs like our ground moving target indicator, soon to be our air moving target indicator, account for these requirements, what the fidelity of the data is, what the latency of the data to support weapons system in-flight updates, et cetera. We make sure we account for all those things as we develop the programs.
Thank you. And Mr. Secretary, in the submitted Air Force posture statement, you describe SAOC crucial to any future warfare endeavor. I agree with that. And it's for this reason that I was disappointed that President Biden, his budget request last year did not include any military construction funding necessary to support SAOC. Do you agree that the Air Force should be planning for SAOC's associated military construction projects, those hangars and ramps, for example, to be completed by the time that SAOC is expected to reach the initial operating capability by 2032?
Yes, Senator, we should be planning for that, and I've already had some discussions on that to make sure that we're ready.
Will you continue to have the Air Force work to ensure that those projects are going to be completed in a timely manner?
Yes, Senator.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to start by noting a very questionable act by President Trump recently, wherein he confirmed that he is planning to accept a $400 million Boeing 747 gift from the Qatari royal family. Let's call this what it is. The president is using the DoD to accept, you could even call it launder, an impermissible gift to skirt constitutional limitations on the acceptance of personal gifts from foreign governments without congressional approval. Even more brazenly, he is placing the burden to retrofit the aircraft on the Air Force, which experts say is likely to cost more than $1 billion before transferring it to his own personal use post-presidency. And of course, a particular concern to this committee as well as other committees, accepting this gift brings with it significant counterintelligence risks. And as we sit here concerning ourselves with the use of taxpayers' money from both an operational security and financial management standpoint, it makes little sense that this should even occur. So, Mr. Chairman, I wanted to make a note of what it is not just me, but others consider very questionable behavior by this president. Moving on to questions for General Saltzman. The Space Force is planning to install up to 7 additional telescopes on Haleakala on Maui to support space domain awareness. Monitoring and tracking the increasing number of objects in orbit is critical to supporting the joint force. However, Haleakala holds cultural significance to the Native Hawaiian community. And given the unique environmental and cultural significance of Haleakala, will you commit to working with and listening to the concerns of local stakeholders to ensure transparency and community engagement as the Space Force considers options for this project?
Absolutely, Senator. We have conducted several community engagements, and we will continue to do that as we progress with the project.
I appreciate that because I know that what you are contemplating is very important, and the last thing we need is for the community to not have the kind of awareness and support that it needs to enable us to and you to go forward. For General Alvin, with the ongoing retirement of the aging E-3 fleet, Pacific Air Forces has identified an urgent need to find a replacement as soon as possible, and I have discussed this with others. Also, and my understanding is the Air Force is planning to spend an additional $400 million in fiscal year 25 for an advanced procurement of the E-7 wedge-tail replacement aircraft. Can you talk about the importance of rapidly fielding an E-3 replacement aircraft to support operations in the Indo-Pacific?
Yeah, thank you very much, Senator, and we couldn't be more on target there with the idea of being able to maintain our ability to do airborne warning and battle management. And the E3 has been a fantastic platform, but it's sort of self-divesting. It is really getting old. And so as we look to the future, we understand there is a future there where, working with my brother in the Space Force, that we will be able to sort of migrate some of that into space. We have to make sure that we can migrate it all into space, not only just the sensing, but the sensing and the making sense and then the deciding based on that. And so the E7 offers advantages that the E3 does not have with respect to enhanced capability, range, and some of the other capabilities that it has. So the ability to maintain a viable battle management, especially in the Indo-Pacific, and some redundancy between the air and space layer as the space layer matures is going to be very important going into the future.
This replacement situation has been already delayed, and my understanding is that administration may still be considering whether to cancel the E7 altogether in favor of a space-based system, but that is going to take time, and I think that you need to have this replacement for aircraft that are over 50 years old much sooner than moving toward a space-based system. Would you agree?
Well, I do believe that we need to maintain that viability, and I don't want to get ahead of where the administration is on this budget, but you're correct in the 25, our 25 position did have us advancing those two prototypes. of
Thank
the
you, Mr.
seven.
Chairman. I will submit other questions for the record.
Thank you, Senator Hirono. Senator Cotton.
General Alvin, you've talked about the need to buy new aircraft to replace our oldest fighters. Why is that? Under the current fighter production plans, we're going to be flying some of our oldest aircraft into the 2040s. Would purchasing more kinds of new fighters now both increase deterrence and improve our ability to defend the homeland while projecting power abroad in the near term?
Yeah, Senator, I think that that's a great point, and having not only the right capacity, but the capability for those, to make sure that we have the right mix of the high end to be able to dominate and be relevant in an Indo-Pacific fight, as well as other fighters that may not need to be as sophisticated as our sort of our fifth generation, sixth generation, so to build out the whole capacity of the Air Force.
Will the CCA Increment 1 be able to replace manned fighters like the Strike Eagle and F-16?
Senator Cotton, we're on the sort of the nascent part of the collaborative combat aircraft, but my assessment as of right now, it will not replace that. It will be a great augmentation, and its threshold is to be able to work with the F-35 and the F-22 even before the F-47 gets fielded. So it will help us deliver more combat capability at a better cost point, but as far as replacing the manned fighters, that remains to be seen. What we have built into Increment 1, my assessment right now is that would not be a good one-for-one replacement, but it does augment.
I did not think so. And given that the President's made the decision to move forward with the F-47 as a manned fighter, one would, if it can't be replaced by autonomous aircraft, you wouldn't think it could do so for the 16 or the Strike Eagle either. Focusing on just the next decade then, our current acquisition options are pretty limited. We've got just a couple airframes right now going. Would you be able to use newly built U.S. configured Block 80 F-16s to strengthen our strike fighter fleet if Congress can find additional funds for such an effort?
Senator Cotton, to give you a good advice on that, I'd really have to look at what the Defense Industrial Base can do on that, because my sense is that the current Block 70 is really eating up a lot of the production line and the production capacity in all the FMS sales. Looking at what that would be to take that export variant and adapt it to a Block 80 and the time it would take and where that would fall in the production line, I'd have to get back with you with more details to see if that would be an advisable situation.
Well, I'm glad you raised the FMS issue with the Block 70. For the quickest fielding timeline, would you be able to use modern Block 70s that are being made for our allies to meet critical needs if that option were available?
I'd have to take that one for the record, because I don't want to give you a yes or no, because specifically understanding what the export variant can and can't do and any sort of adjustments we would have to make it more easily integratable with our U.S. Built fighters. So I would need to see what the integration opportunities and costs would be before I could give you a good answer on that. But if I could take that for the record and give you a bit more detailed answer.
I would like, more details
Yes, sir.
back to the committee on that, because getting to your first point, it's not just about the most highly capable fighters, the 22s, the 35s, and ultimately the 47s, but about the capacity, just the sheer number we have. And there are pretty significant shortfalls over the next decade, isn't that right?
Well, as we continue to keep the older aircraft, they do become more and more expensive to maintain. And as we mentioned before, the mission capable rate, it's not what we'd like it to be. It's again, the average F-16 is it was really the average F-16 that we have right now was built right about the time the Cold War ended. So even those F-16s are getting pretty old.
Okay. Finally, beyond the fighter aircraft, you've said the country needs more Air Force. Could you elaborate specifically on what you mean in practical terms and what specifically Congress can do to best support the country getting more Air Force?
Thank you, Senator, and I'll go very quickly. I think when we look at all of the things that we'll discuss here today, I would love to have a more rapidly modernized and capable air refueling force, because it's about range in the Pacific, and so having survivable tanking to be able to do that. More Air Force, so as we do our operations in the Indo-Pacific in agile combat employment to ensure base resiliency, base survivability, so some more air-based air defense, to have more capabilities not only in the platforms, but in the munitions. Our munitions portfolio would need to increase. So there are so many things. And oh, by the way, I haven't even talked about the nuclear, which we cannot take our eyes off the ball on that, and as well as what it's going to take for defending the threats to the homeland. So all of those things, when you stack them up, and we try and prioritize with the limited budgets, there are many unhappy folks here that we don't have all that we would like to have. And so I think it's not only just more capacity, but also putting more lethality into that capacity.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cotton. General Alvin, how are we going to get more range in our refueling in the near term?
Well, actually, I was talking about the survivability. So more tails in the air, right? So ensuring that we continue the recapitalization of the KC-135 fleet into the future, and then really, Chairman, we can talk about this in another session, but making sure that as they get into a more and more contested environment, and they do those things that air refueling does so well, which allows our combat capability to have the loitering time and all of the time to be able to spend more time prosecuting targets, we need to make sure that those air refuelers that we have can stay in the air and can maintain more survivability. So it's not only just the modernization of it, but also looking to make it more survivable.
Thank you, General, and thank you, Senator Cotton. Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to follow up on that very question. One way to help on the tanker capacity is KC-46s at Bangor, affectionately known as the Maniacs. As you know, they provided enormous support during the Gulf War, and anything on the east side of the United States in terms of Europe, the Middle East, it's going to be an incredibly important capacity. So they're doing fantastically with their present fleet, but the KC-46s is the next generation. And as you pointed out yourself, tankers are the heart and soul of being able to keep our forces over the target. So I hope that's something on your agenda.
Absolutely, Senator. And sort of the Maniacs they're on the list as part of one of the candidate locations, and the final location for preferred location will happen in the fourth quarter of this year.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And Mr. Chairman, I think we could save a lot of money on the F-47, because Secretary Mink is the only Secretary of the Air Force I know of who's ever designed, built, and flown his own experimental aircraft. So we could just have him do the F-47 himself, right, Secretary Mink?
Is that the form of a motion?
I don't think my garage has the infrastructure to build a 46, but.
Thank you. General Alvin, I am concerned about availability and mission availability. You mentioned a couple of figures, 50%, 62%. The commercial air fleet is in the high 90s. Now, granted, there are more complicated systems in the military, but I believe, and this applies to the Navy as well, that we really don't put enough emphasis on maintenance and availability. We're talking about very expensive products here, very expensive aircraft, and if we had more of them ready to fly, we perhaps wouldn't have to buy as many new ones. So I hope that could, I see that as closing that gap between 62% and 98%, which is the commercial availability rate, would go a long way toward helping us with our budget and also helping us with our readiness.
Well, Senator, thank you for that. I would say that one of the big challenges is that the airlines have a profit model. They have a different business model. And so as they look at that, they generate their
the difference
value.
is they have to meet a profit realization rate, and we don't. The military doesn't. And I think I'm just saying, surely we can get beyond 62%.
I do believe, Senator, we do need to improve. I think one of the big challenges, though, is what I was trying to drive at is the KC-135s, the average one, is as old as me, and I'm no spring chicken. And so the airlines, they just throw theirs out after a certain one because it becomes cost ineffective for them to maintain older platforms that it can still have enough seats, passenger seats, to maintain a profit. So they'll dump those off to the side.
I understand that, but do you believe that we can do better than 62%?
I do believe we can do better, and I think it becomes more challenging the older the aircraft aircraft get because we're discovering new things all the time because they're breaking in new and different ways. But yes, Senator, we can continue to do better. We put more money against it every year. Unfortunately, for the past few years, despite the increased money that we put into weapon system sustainment, because the increase of age, it takes more man hours and more mechanical hours. We aren't getting that much of an increase because we're spending more time trying to fix those. And so, but that is a challenge we're constantly working. We do need to improve.
Thank you. General Saltzman, you've been very diplomatic today, but if we were starting with a blank sheet of paper in terms of the threats that we're facing, particularly the militarization of space by both the Russians and the Chinese, 3% of the defense budget for the Space Force is totally inadequate. And I hope you can comment on that, understanding that you're under the subject of the defense budget and all those kinds of things. But as far as I'm concerned, we need to vastly, significantly increase the availability of funds to the Space Force, given the magnitude of the mission to which you've been assigned.
I agree, Senator. The last 3 years of funding has not allowed me to go as quickly as possible, putting counterspace capabilities together that address the targets that I'm being asked to address by U.S. Space Command, amongst other combatant commanders.
One of the ways I like to think about these things is if you were starting with a blank sheet of paper for allocation of defense funds today, I don't think there's any question that the Space Force would get substantially more resources given the development of the threat, which is the first hours or days of any conflict with a major adversary are going to take place in space. And as you mentioned, and as Senator Fisher mentioned, sensors, GPS, everything is going to depend on our ability to defend that domain. So I certainly hope to work with members of the committee to see that you have the resources adequate to meet the challenges that you've been asked to meet. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator King. Senator Rounds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, let me just say thank you to all three of you for your service to our country. Secretary Mink, I know that you're drinking out of a fire hose right now, so I'm not going to get into all of the current situation with regard to the Air Force, but I would like to discuss something that I think is critical, and I know that you've got a background in it, and that is, and it'll come to no surprise to the rest of the committee, I want to talk about spectrum for just a minute. We've heard from, I know, no surprise, right? We've now heard from 24 senior DOD officials in hearings over the last 2 years, including every service chief and 8 combatant commanders, that vacating the 3.1 to 3.45 gigahertz band of the spectrum would have extremely serious and negative consequences for our warfighting capabilities. In fact, the Department of the Navy alone has estimated that relocating their systems to a different part of the spectrum band would cost them approximately $250 billion. How would forcing the Air Force to vacate the 3.1 to 3.45 gigahertz and other critical bands of the electromagnetic spectrum impact the service's warfighting capabilities?
First off, Senator, thank you for the support on this particular issue. As you mentioned, we've been discussing this for quite some time. And for other members of the committee and other parts of Congress and support in this area. One of the things we discussed a little bit is what would it cost to do that and what would be the impact? I think that one of the things we're struggling with a little bit is that just due to the nature of physics of how these systems operate and how the atmosphere absorbs energy, that's a pretty special band. And it's difficult and maybe in some ways almost impossible just to move to other bands. So in some cases, it may be very difficult, if not impossible, to totally replicate some of the capabilities we have in that band. And it would take quite some time to do so, even if we could.
Would you
so I
say
think that's what we're struggling with now, Senator, is how do we do that analysis to figure out what we could do and how we would move and what spectrum we'd move to. So it's difficult to quantify it.
Our near-peer adversaries know that, don't they?
Oh, of course, Senator, and the impacts would be pretty significant.
They would love to see us voluntarily abandon that particular part of the spectrum from what we use it for, which is radar. Fair to say?
I would agree with that, Senator. Yes.
It would be an unforced error for us to ever give up that part of the spectrum for one of its highest rated uses. The physics involved in it means that this is the place where radar really works.
without a much better transition plan and understanding of how we would do that, it would be a mistake, Senator.
Thank you. Do you have any kind of an estimate as to what it would cost if we could migrate someplace else, even if it would not provide us as good of capabilities? Any idea yet at all?
I think we actually had this discussion last night. I actually don't think, just because of that we don't have a coherent plan of where and how we would maneuver or move, we actually don't have a good number for you, Senator.
Thank you. General Saltzman, look, based on what you know, the potential paths forward for building out President Trump's Golden Dome, is it possible to make it work if the Department of Defense were forced to vacate portions of the 3.1 to 3.45 gigahertz band and other unnamed critical bands of the spectrum that the Space Force currently uses as well?
Senator, as we evaluate the sensors that are going to be necessary to pick up hypersonics, to pick up cruise missiles, to pick up ballistic missiles, the radars are essential in that area, and that 3.1 to 3.45 is, like, as the Secretary mentioned, the physical properties of that spectrum range are ideal for that kind of detection using radar, and so the sensing part of the Golden Dome would suffer if we had to vacate.
This is a tiered system. It's not one which is totally space-based. There are certain assets in space that will help us to detect incoming weapon systems, but it is critical that it's tiered with other systems that are that are based on the terrain and in the area of the targets that we're protecting, correct?
Most of our space domain awareness, which is what's required to close that kill chain as things transit through space, most of those sensors are ground-based. The system that we're building, the DARK system, lives in this particular spectrum band as well and is critical to space domain awareness.
Thank you. I'm just going to, very, very quickly, General Alvin, we're contracted right now for 100 B-21s. Anywhere close to the number that we're going to need?
Senator, if we could snap our fingers right now, I'd take as many as we could get right now. So as we look to the path of how many we get into the future, and we look at opportunities, we also need to look at what this B-52 modernization program, if it goes worse than we hope, then we would need more. If it goes better than we hope, I would say right now I'd take all I can get with the funding. But it's an incredible capability that turns out right now is testing pretty well. So the 100 minimum is certainly something we can stand behind. When we look at what the maximum is, I really want to look at the risk over time and opportunities over time.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And thank you. Senator Peters, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Mink, following the Air Force's announcement last year to base 12 brand-new KC-46 refueling tankers at Selfridge Air National Guard Base in Michigan, I was proud to have, at that time, secured the Air Force commitment that that decision did not preclude Selfridge from receiving a future fighter mission. Following this commitment, and after years of advocacy by myself as well as the entire Michigan delegation, both Democrats and Republicans, the administration announced last month that Selfridge would also receive 21 F-15EX fighter jets to replace the base's aging A-10s. I'm certainly very proud, as all Michiganders are, of Selfridge's exceptional 108-year legacy defending our nation. And with this announcement, I'm certain that legacy will continue for decades to come. Sir, you have already publicly committed to honoring the KC-46 basing decision during your nomination hearing, which I appreciate. So my question for you is, following Selfridge's F-15EX announcement, do I have your commitment that future Air Force spending will support the recapitalization of Selfridge's A-10s with these new F-15EXs?
Thank you for the question, Senator. Yeah, so based on the President's decision, the Air Force is putting a plan together to execute the placement of F-15EXs at Selfridge.
Thank you. Thank you for that commitment. General Alvin, on that same note, Selfridge's F-15EX fighters and the KC-46 tankers will require some specialized infrastructure and ground support equipment, including modifications to flight lines as well as to some hangars, although we've already made pretty substantial investments into that base, but we're going to need more. This will include KC-46 unique refueling requirements, and the F-15EX specialized maintenance demands. So my question for you is, how is the Air Force prioritizing bases like Selfridge with near-term military construction needs to support these flying missions that are imminent?
Thank you, Senator. Our target is obviously, as the decisions are made, we want to ensure that as we lay in the platforms don't go there with the supporting infrastructure. So as we look at the timing, that timing may adjust the timing of the platforms or of the infrastructure, one of the two. So we look at those both holistically on pairing up the ability so when the platforms get there, you can use them, as well as a prioritization across the department for the most critical infrastructure that we need to put MILCON against. So our target is to make sure that when the platforms get there, they're able to be used as soon as possible.
Well, I like the option where we're going to make sure the platforms don't get pushed back any further, so to make sure that the construction's happening first. So I would hope that would be a priority of you, that we could work with you on that. Obviously, we have these older platforms, the A-10 particularly is leaving. If there's too large a gap, that causes all sorts of personnel issues and all of the complications that you're well aware of. So hopefully we can focus on that. My question is to you as well as to Secretary Mink as well. I've discussed with both of you the critical importance of collaborative combat aircraft, and as both of you know, CCAs are autonomous systems which will work in tandem with our manned fighters, including the F-15EXs, to increase their lethality and decrease risk to our manned platforms. Also can work with the KC-46s in a great manner as well. As these programs develop, I remain hopeful that this cutting-edge technology will also be concurrently fielded with Air National Guard units. So my question to both of you is, given the National Guard's evolution from strategic reserve into a true operational force, how is the Air Force planning for concurrent fielding of CCAs to include Air National Guard? And would you plan on fielding these systems with existing fighter squadrons, including F-15EXs?
Senator, I'll take a shot at it and see if the Secretary has anything to add. Well, first, fundamentally, I think what we don't want to do is fall into the trap of treating them like any other manned platform. This is an opportunity to think about a unique new way that we're not only going to operate them, but also comes with a unique new way we may want to sustain them, to house them, to train with them. And so we have an experimental operations unit that is getting stood up at Creech right now that is really going to uncover some of that, to figure out what is the best way to manage them. How do we train? How much is done in the synthetic environment? How much is done actual flying, since these are autonomous? So as those unfold, so will our strategy for how and where we actually end up posturing those across.
Mr. Secretary?
That's a good answer.
Very good.
And your time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Senator Ernst.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for our witnesses for being here today. And I know all of you do murder boards before you come in front of us, so you all should know exactly what I am going to talk about today. And General Saltzman, you can take a breather. We're not going to talk Space Force today. But everyone knows I'm a proud National Guardsman, and even though it was Army Guard, I appreciate our Air Guard brothers and sisters. So I deeply understand the critical role our Air National Guard plays in defending our homeland. The Air Force's top priority, as outlined in the fiscal year 26 posture statement, is defending the homeland. And that starts with maintaining a geographically distributed force. So we're going to talk a little bit about our Air National Guard in Iowa and the 185th Refueling Wing. Very important unit to the Midwest. General Alvin, I've written down a few phrases you've said over the course of the hearing. More tails in the air, survivability, resilience, and one that I love, when the platforms get there, the MILCON is there. In 2003, our F-16s were taken away from the Sioux City, Iowa Air National Guard, with the Air Force's commitment that when they received the KC-135, they would have a new runway that would support the weight of the 135. That has not happened. 20 years, and the MILCON has not been there. Secretary Mink, please take notes on this as well. 20 years the Air Force has let this go, The fear in Sioux City now is that because we cannot support the 46, that we will never upgrade to the 46. We will lose our unit. I am really concerned about this. This has gone on for way too long, and I've talked to way too many people in the Air Force and the Air National Guard, and it has not happened. We are concentrating these tankers all in various regions. They're concentrated. We need geographic disbursement. Let me talk to you a little bit about Sioux City and the history there and how proud we are of those units that have occupied this airfield. And let's just start by saying the name of the airfield is the Colonel Bud Day Airfield. For those folks in the Air Force that don't know who Colonel Bud Day is, you need to go back and figure out your history. This gentleman is a Sioux City native that was awarded the Medal of Honor and the Air Force Cross. And I believe he's probably the only person in the Air Force to have done that. He grew up there and he ended his career in Sioux City. Other folks notable that are related to units that have crossed through Sioux City, Jimmy Stewart, famous actor. He's also a cousin to my great-grandfather. Okay, Louis Zamperini, known for the movie Unbroken. Lieutenant Colonel Kelly Cook, whose remains have never been returned from Vietnam. These are all folks that are connected to this area. We have a proud history there. And I'd just like to know how many more times, General Alvin and Secretary Mink, that I have to bring this up in personal meetings in my office and in front of the committee to get a commitment to get the MilCon done for this runway. General Alvin, please.
Thank you, Senator Ernst, and also thank you for sort of publicly acknowledging Bud Day as well, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of Google searches.
I knew him. He is phenomenal.
So when
God
we first
bless
spoke about this, you and I spoke about this 2 years ago. And I said, yes, ma'am, we're going to do that. And we started working on the design. Last year, we put the money in to start towards 35%. As you know, the MilCon has to go through the design phase and has to get into a certain maturation before it goes from design and can compete for funding. It needs to get through the 35% design. It is now at 65% design, which means I can now, if it competes in the MilCon prioritization with everything else, then it wins. If not, I have the opportunity for it to compete in my unfunded priority list. I couldn't do that until we got past the 35% design. We are now past the 35% design. So I feel like my communications with you have been fairly consistent, and we'll continue that into the future.
But can we have a commitment that this will be done?
You have my commitment that I will continue to push on this. And yes, I think that's the key, is it's all about the funding to be able to support it. The design work is now, it's limiting any of the obstacles on our path to being able to actually do it. But now we're at 65% design.
Thank you, sir. Secretary Mink.
Yes, Senator, as the chief mentioned, at 65% complete design rate, we can now start working it into the ranking for MilCom. And once I see that, I'll make sure I come talk to you about it, Senator.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the commitment today in front of the public, and we look forward to seeing this completed in the near future.
Thank you. Senator Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Alvin, last September, the Air Force activated the Integrated Capabilities Command to integrate requirements and development and emerging capabilities and to modernize the force. The formation of this command is very timely as the service moves towards NGAD, the F-47. So General Alvin, I'm interested in the F-47 and how you see this new command, the Integrated Capabilities Command, supporting future development, both for the F-47 and the B-21 and anything beyond that.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. And we are now to the point where we have the Integrated Capabilities Command is in a provisional status. It was part of the series of activities that we had paused, and now we have a secretary in the seat who can evaluate those and make sure that we're on the right path for evolving that into where it needs to be. In its current instantiation, the vision is the value of the Integrated Capabilities Command is it doesn't develop the platform to be the best platform in the world. It understands what we're doing now is going through mission threads. What does that capability have to integrate with? It has to integrate with all the C3 and battle management has to integrate with the other capabilities, the crypto modernization, all those things.
Does it do the integration with the CCAs?
It will ensure, yes, so that's the other value of it. It ensures that system integrates with the others to develop an operational outcome, not just a performance parameter. And so it will ensure that. It will also ensure that as we move forward, some of the good ideas, we ensure that the good ideas meet the force design, not just make the platform better. If they make the platform better, but they don't make the platform perform better across the whole mission, then it's probably not worth spending the money on. So it will help us also make better use of every dollar to where that F-47 and those CCA and the B-21 and everything that goes with it gets a better combat outcome. And
Is it fully staffed at this point?
Not at this point. It's got the provisional, and so it is doing modest work now. And as we look towards the next level of that, it will now take the sort of federated approach from some of the capability development being done in Langley and some in Barksdale and some at Scott. It will actually put those together and say, what does one Air Force force design look like? And that's its vision.
Is it pretty high level, or do you have like software engineers there to make sure software between platforms is integrated?
That the value of setting it up like it is, the software engineers and the technical experts, they are very tightly linked with the current office called the Agile Development Office. But they're the ones who take the good ideas from the operator and say, is that technically feasible? And it also has one-stop shopping for outside industry to come in and say, hey, I got a new design, I got a good product here. We can let them know, yes, go ahead and spend your IRAD dollars on that because that is going to be a part of our future force design or not. So it also helps industry as well. But it's got all the smart software engineers working with our Air Force Material Command.
Thank you. Unrelated subject. As the department continues to embrace multi-domain warfare, I'm concerned about the lack of training space available where we can integrate all domains, and we're dealing with airplanes that are flying faster and higher and air-to-air missiles that have a greater range. The stick is getting bigger. The ranges aren't getting bigger. We need cost-effective training for our pilots and the ability to actually engage in a contested EW environment. Last year at this hearing, we talked about opportunities to integrate the Air Force, Army, and Marine Corps training ranges in the state of Arizona to do multi-domain operationals and to have, the ability to do just longer runs. So since then, General, what steps have you taken to stitch together to bridge these training areas in the state of Arizona to get better training for the Joint Force?
Yeah, thank you, Senator. I would say that we're still be in the forming phase. Last year, we had a lot of exercises like the Bamboo Eagle exercises where we understood what the operational joint exercise would look like. We haven't yet looked at the stitching together, but your point was it was right last year and it's still right this year. There's the opportunity because of the geography of Arizona and actually leaking into New Mexico as well.
Yeah, we can go from Goldwater through the Outlaw and Jackal NOAA. You got to stitch those two together, and then beyond that to the White Sands Missile Range. And then you have a training range that I think is maybe, unmatched, maybe in CONUS, obviously in Alaska. That's I don't know if Senator Sullivan's here. He likes to talk about that.
It still has great value because right now in order to do some of that long-range training, we're out in the Whiskey area. So we're out just over the oceans, which obviously limits us from geography. So getting together the multi-domain exercises to figure out where we're short and where we don't want to do it synthetically, we actually want to do it in the physical space. It still
Are the conversations with the FAA happening?
Those are going to need to be key, but we need to get together with the Army and the other services and actually ask the FAA exactly what we need to ensure that we can do that. Not ask for the moon, but what's practical.
So you've had no conversations with the FAA about this?
Not at the joint level. At the Air Force level, we have, but we really want to stitch that together with the other joint force. And
okay, can you get me an update on this in a few months?
Yeah, we'll do that.
Thank you, General.
Thank you, Senator Kelly. Senator Kramer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, gentlemen, for being here, and congratulations, Dr. Mink, on finally getting the job for good. I hope you're sleeping occasionally. We'll try to take it easy on you. Although I have to say, after listening to Senator Ernst and Senator Peters get after you guys, I feel like I've been a little easy on you, General, but I don't know. Well, I'll try to keep my cheerful demeanor here, but I want to get right to something important, General Saltzman, because I noticed they've been leaving you out a little bit. I was reading about Golden Dome. I do a lot of that these days, and noticed that two of our least favorite dictators in the world, Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin, had put out a joint statement worrying about the Golden Dome being a, quote, having a destabilizing effect, and suggesting that the United States might be leading toward weaponizing space, which is rich coming from those two guys. Do our enemies have weapons in space that you know of, General?
Yes, Senator, they do. Over the last few years, we've observed, for instance, the Russians have performed some very aggressive on-orbit capabilities in terms of plane matching, getting very close to some of our most sensitive satellites in aggressive ways. They've released what could be presumed to be kinetic kill vehicles that we've watched on orbit. The PRC has demonstrated the ability to use a grappling arm to grab a satellite and pull it out of its operational orbit, return it. All of these are demonstrated capabilities that could be used as anti-satellite technology.
So, as is often the case, I find myself as following Senator King and agreeing with him with regard to your budget. And maybe this is a redundant question, but are you adequately funded to meet this kind of a threat in space, and as well as obviously the rest of the world that you have to protect?
It's just about scale, sir. I've often used the analogy that it's like transforming the Merchant Marine into the U.S. Navy or United Airlines into the U.S. Air Force. There's a lot of new equipment, there's new training, there's new people. We can't just take what we had and presume that we can gain space superiority with that equipment. That new equipment requires new resources. And so that's where the disconnect comes, I think, in full funding.
I think your answer to that is that we are not adequately funded. Is that correct, General?
We are not adequately funded for the new missions that I've been given in space superiority.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mr. Chairman, because scale matters, right? I mean, if we have the world's greatest weapons but not enough of them to defeat the enemy, then we're not adequately funded. You're all, by the way, thank you for being so open about the issue, the shortcomings, because we're here to help, and we can't help if we don't know where we're short, and you've all been great this morning, so I thank you for that. I think I'm going to skip over the Sentinel stuff because I think you handled that very well, Dr. Mink, with Senator Fisher. Although I will say I've been concerned about some of the rumors I've been hearing about a $1 billion cut, maybe priorities. I think she referenced something to that effect, and I'm just going to not even ask you to. We just need to do more. I guess the bottom line is my commitment is we need to do more to make sure we're not falling backwards anywhere and that we're projecting forward everywhere that we can. So General Alvin, I'll just simply go to MQ-9s. ISR, my favorite topic, as you know, my concern with the Air Force, sort of both retiring and in the case of MQ-9s, treating some of our ISR capability. Do you have enough MQ-9s? I'm quite familiar with the aircraft, as you know. MQ-9s to sort of meet the current demand, and I know there's never enough, but are you concerned? Should I be concerned about the MQ-9 population?
Well, as it stands right now, as you mentioned, Senator, that we have lost several in combat and in operations. As it exists today, we do our A3 is working with the Joint Staff and understanding how to alter the force offering. But as we continue to attrite more, it becomes more and more critical. I can probably give you a little bit more at a sure. higher level, but it is getting to the point where we need to ensure that every one of them is more as survivable as possible. And that some of the areas where we're hoping to improve, as you're well aware, some of the things we're looking to improve on are putting sort of the capability for the enhanced proliferated LEO architecture to be able to put that on the MQ-9. This is where I might make my pitch for more funding flexibility, because right now it's a $17 million ask, and because that is above the below threshold reprogramming. We're having to go through a longer process with us in Congress to get that approved. But the more we could have that flexibility to be able to accelerate the fielding of those proliferated LEO architecture on those MQ-9s, it'll make them more survivable.
Well, just as scale matters, so does speed, right? So we've got a lot of things to figure out, and we're grateful, Mr. Secretary, you're there to help us do that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Kramer. Senator Warren, you made it by a matter of seconds.
It counts.
You are
Thank you.
recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So look, we all want the Air Force to have the money it needs to keep us safe, and we all want those funds to be spent as effectively and as efficiently as possible. The Air Force's budget request was about $220 billion last year, and many of those billions going to develop weapon systems. But even then, contractors try to withhold technical data rights, preventing service members from repairing equipment that the Air Force itself owns. So, Secretary Mink, you know this problem. During your confirmation process, you said that in a contested logistics environment, quote, airmen will need to be authorized and empowered to manufacture parts and fix their equipment. I agree with you on this. When DoD secures repair rights, that increases our battlefield readiness and it lowers costs. When Tinker Air Force Base needed to replace a pressure door handle for the C-5 transport aircraft, the Air Force manufactured the part itself and saved 95% of the cost because it wasn't tripped up by contractor restrictions. So, Mr. Secretary, do you agree that this type of major cost savings makes right to repair a strategic priority for the Air Force and for its budget?
Thank you, Senator. Yes, I do agree with that. And that's something I've already had discussions with the team on in the first couple days. I think it's not only from a cost perspective, Senator. I think from a readiness perspective, as General Alvin has discussed multiple times, both are affected with our ability to have more flexibility in how we do parts sustainment.
Absolutely. Okay, cost and readiness. So it's no surprise that new polling just released today found that over 70% of voters overwhelmingly favor Congress passing a defense right to repair law. Americans know that this is a big opportunity to save billions of dollars. Secretary Driscoll is leading the way with the new Army Transformation Initiative released earlier this month, making it a standard for Army contracts to include right to repair from day one. But airmen far from home need to be able to fix their own equipment as well. They shouldn't be waiting, in some cases we know up to 6 months, for a refurbished T-38 trainer engine. So, Mr. Secretary, shouldn't the Air Force adopt a service-wide right to repair policy like the Army's policy so that we can get grounded jets back into the air faster?
So, Senator, I'm not familiar with the details of what Secretary Driscoll has proposed, but the idea of having that flexibility, I fully support.
Okay.
And again, that's one of the things we're going to be looking at.
I love hearing that you like the idea, but what we got to do is we got to put that idea into action. Right to repair is one important tool for the Air Force to protect its budget. But contractors will find any way they can to overcharge the military right up until the moment they get caught. Last year, DoD's Inspector General found that Boeing charged the Air Force 80 times, that's 80 times, the available commercial price for a soap dispenser during a C-17 sustainment contract. Now, that overcharge was found only through an investigation after the fact and sort of by happenstance. It makes you wonder what kind of other overcharges are going unnoticed. And that is why the IG recommended that contracting officers be notified when a price for an item like a spare part increases over 25%. Mr. Secretary, would the Air Force be in a better position to detect this kind of price gouging if your contracting officers had to be notified when there was a price spike?
Yes, Senator, more data in this area would be always helpful.
All right, good. You know, I'm working with my colleagues across the aisle to get this type of price information into the hands of all of our contracting officers, but the Air Force needs to be updating its own policies as well. Because we all agree that the Air Force's hundreds of billions of dollars should be spent efficiently to benefit our service members and our taxpayers, not just to benefit contractor executives. If we can get airmen the right to repair and contracting officers the information they need to stop price gouging, the Air Force can start buying smarter service-wide. And I look forward to working with you and with you, Mr. Chairman, and all of my colleagues on this committee to get it done. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. The senator from Alaska.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and gentlemen. Thank you for your testimony today. Mr. Secretary, congratulations. We are really excited to see you here. I'm going to bring up this map again. Can you scoot it over? This is our Russian-Chinese incursion map in Alaska. You know, we talk about defending the homeland. This is defending the homeland, right? We had another incursion in April. Some Navy stuff going on with the Russians that was happening very recently. All in our ADAs, all in our EEZ. And Mr. Secretary, you've done these ADAs Alaska missions, isn't that true?
Yes, Senator.
They're not easy, right?
Many years ago with F-15s.
They're not easy, right? You got to tank probably 3 or 4 times just to get out to the EEZ. It's a big state, isn't that correct?
Yes, Senator. There's a lot of airspace up there.
So during your hearing, and this is an issue I've only been pressing the Secretary of the Air Force and Chief of Staff of the Air Force, I think 10 years now, you committed to 3 additional KC-130s, 135s to support the airmen who are doing these great, important intercept missions. Can you give me a timeline for the rebasing of those aircraft to be part of active affiliation up in Alaska, where we need these tankers for sure?
I'm going to try to call on a friend here. General Alvin, do you know the timeline on that?
Yeah, thank you, Senator. Of course, as there was 4, the 1 is up there. We're still going on the final 3. The final 3 are going to be sourced out of Kadena, and so because that requires an overseas force structure change piece, it's with Joint Staff and OSD. They're determined because most of the folks at Kadena spend up a lot of time in Alaska doing that support mission. So that is in process. It's going to be about a plus up of 175 airmen as well. So we wanted to ensure that they also have the right housing. As you know, we've discussed several times about ensuring that we have good off-base housing for them. And so right now, the overseas force structure change process is going on with OSD and Joint Staff. So that is moving forward.
Okay.
And that really was triggered after last fall's housing research and marketing analysis saying, yes, we believe now that the community housing is satisfactory enough to be able to start moving families up there.
So what does that mean in terms of timeline? Do you have a estimate?
I'm going to have to take that for the record. Again, that's out of ours, but it depends on how fast it moves through the OSD process.
Okay, well, let's get them moving. Like I said, I've only been pressing this issue for 10 years, and it makes strategic sense. This is not some kind of gimme. This is J-Park training. This is real-world missions that our great airmen are doing up in Alaska all the time. By the way, everybody thinks these are real easy missions. When you're in an F-16, tanking 4 different times, going over the Arctic Ocean in February, in the middle of the night, you lose an engine, you're screwed, right? These are tough missions, and the men and women you guys are in charge of do such a great job doing it, but they make it look easy, but they're not easy. And more tankers, more AWACS, we all need it. These are frontline missions that can be dangerous. Real quick, this is a little bit of a broader issue, but you talked earlier about strengthening our posture in Indo-PACOM. One issue I've raised with the Secretary of the Navy and his leadership and the Indo-PACOM commander, we sure seem to be over-concentrating on Guam. Air Force assets, Navy assets. My numbers that I have are between now and 2033, we might have up to $50 billion more in MILCON on Guam. My goodness, I think it's a lack of strategic imagination by the Pentagon. Any of you have a view on that? Are we over-concentrated on Guam? I mean, is Anderson Air Force Base going to take several missiles in the first days of a conflict with China, and we're going to be like, wait, why are we having all the Navy and all the Air Force in Indo-PACOM on Guam? That was a really dumb idea. But what do you gentlemen think?
Yeah, Senator, you make a good point. The key is that right now, for the Air Force, Guam is not the ultimate destination of our Indo-Pacific posture, and so we're working on the regional-based cluster. So the Guam cluster, I think you've seen, we built out Tinian, which is an amazing story. I could tell you with more time, and Yap and Palau. And so our concept is, as we can build more resilience in some of those clusters to go beyond Guam. But as you said, the Department of Defense has invested a whole lot. We believe that in order to be more survival, you can't just only defend and do robust defense on Guam, but we're actually pushing out into that second island chain to some of the base clusters.
Well, this committee is taking a hard look at ADAC, and 8,000-foot runways, a big hangar. Go look at a map. That is about as strategic terrain as it gets, not just for the Navy, but for the Air Force. And I do think it's something we need to look hard at in terms of being over-concentrated on Guam. I think the Navy is, I think the Air Force is, and I think in terms of our oversight, we need to get to the right mix. And I agree with you, General. The Air Force has a good plan on dispersion of forces, your ACE plan, but we need to do more on that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Sullivan. Senator Slotkin.
Thank you, Chairman. Thanks for being here. A couple of questions, Secretary. Selfridge Air Force Base, just following on some of the questions from Senator Peters. I know that was a decision many of us worked very hard for over a decade to try and get and couldn't get. And it breaks a lot of China to have our F-15s show up to replace our A-10s. We thank you for that. We're very happy about that decision. But can you commit to making sure it happens on time? We have an issue where we could lose a lot of airmen. If our A-10 pilots and crews go off, they're allowed to go back into normal civilian life, and then years later we get our F-15. So can you commit to doing all the environmental studies, all the pieces that have to go into place in order to have them arrive on time as the President announced?
Yes, Senator. Yeah, and we are working out the lay in that plan based on the President's decision. And, as we have more detail, we'll make sure to provide that.
Okay, great. Thank you. The other issue is also related to the Air Force. It's on the issue of PFAS and forever chemicals, particularly at Oscoda, in Oscoda at Wurtsmith Air Force Base. The Air Force does not dispute over the past decade that it was the PFAS from the firefighting foam on the base that contaminated local people's waters, their lakes, right? There are kids that swim in those lakes. There are waters that are drank by an entire community. And last year, the EPA put a scientific standard on how much PFAS you can have on water before it makes you sick. We were thrilled, and the Air Force, to their credit, came into action and said, we'll now begin taking interim measures to clean up PFAS in Oscoda, Michigan, among other places. Last week, the administration reversed that decision and now does not care about the health standards of PFAS in our water. And I'm wondering, will the Air Force continue to take interim measures to clean up the water around Wurtsmith Air Force Base?
So, Senator, I'm not familiar with the decision you referenced, but the department will continue to work to make sure that both our people and the surrounding communities are prioritized, and we will work to clean up and be transparent about it.
Okay, because for a decade, we tried to get the Air Force to move. They wouldn't until last year. And then the EPA standards were again slid backwards, despite this administration's interest in making American healthy again. I guess that doesn't matter when it comes to forever chemicals in our water. So I just ask your help in committing to continuing those interim measures. They're gradual, they're not steep, but we need to hold the Air Force, you have to clean up what you messed up for this community that cannot drink its water, that cannot safely swim in its water. And then lastly, let me just ask, we had a lot of debate and discussion about the gift of the Qatari jet that was given to the President for Air Force One. has the country of Qatar, General Alvin, submitted a request to buy F-35s, an official request to the Pentagon?
I have not received a request for them to buy F-35s.
Mr. Secretary, are you aware, that's been reported publicly, that they have now submitted recently a request to buy F-35s?
I'm not aware of that, Senator, but I'll take it for the record.
Okay, I think it's important because we just had a 4-star Navy, number 2 of the Navy, convicted yesterday of bribery for a very similar type of thing, pay for play. We give you a gift, we give you an opportunity, you make things happen for us inside the Pentagon. It was embarrassing to have a 4-star admiral convicted in court yesterday, highest ranking in American history. So I just ask, as the president is moving to try and accept a gift of a jet, that we don't do something as stupid and as obvious as pay for play on selling the Qataris F-35. So I'd ask you to very, very rigorously look at that issue, and I yield back.
Thank you, Senator Slotkin. Senator Scott.
Thank you, Chairman. First off, thanks to each of you for your service. Joe Alvin, Secretary Mink, let me first talk about Homestead. As you know, we have our adversaries, Russia, China, Iran, are doing more and more in Latin America. Cuba's 90 miles away. We've got China. All of them are doing bad things down there. So can you just talk about the importance of Homestead Air Force Base and what you think the future of Homestead Air Force Base is?
Homestead, of course, has been a long time very important base for the Air Force and for the nation, and will continue into the future. They're a very supportive community. They run a great mission down there, and so I believe Homestead is one of those that you should be very proud of, the community and the mission there that they conduct.
So you both believe it'll continue to be an important, a crucial military asset?
Yes, Senator, I do.
Okay. All right. Next, General Saltzman. How important is our satellites for communications, missile detection, and operations?
Very important.
So the satellites we're dependent on, if China was able to just destroy a dozen or so and leave all that debris in space, how big of an impact would that have?
I believe the Joint Force would struggle to meet its objectives, certainly in the Western Pacific and maybe elsewhere.
Okay. So a couple things. When systems are compromised, is it harder to disable a large distributed satellite network?
Indications are that the more targets you have to disrupt or destroy in order to achieve a mission effect, the more resilient that architecture is.
Yeah, so if they were smaller, more distributed, that'd be better for us, right?
They'd be more resilient.
Yeah. So also we face a lot of procurement delays like we do, seems like everything in the military. Does that impact your ability to defend our country?
Yeah, the slower the capabilities are delivered to the warfighter, the less they can use them, obviously.
Do you think we need to do more public-private partnerships where we have private companies that are willing to invest their own capital and scale up quicker than what we're doing?
We've got tremendous efforts already trying to get as much IRAD, as much industry investment in R&D as possible to try to drop the technical risk associated with key platforms. So there is a tremendous amount of investment, but more is always better, I think, in this area.
Are you using agencies like the Space Development Agency to work with commercial players who are ready to deliver quickly with the scale, speed, and innovation we need to stay ahead of our adversaries and maintain peace through strength?
Yes, sir. We've got substantial investments, as I mentioned, in the commercial sector to develop those technologies. The Space Development Agency's sole acquisition model, the strategy is about leveraging rapidly what commercial industry is producing in order to go fast to put capabilities in the hands of our warfighters.
So are you optimistic that we're going to be able to afford to put the satellite systems up, that we'll be able to make sure that China's not able to destroy our ability to communicate or missile detection, any of these things?
Yeah, resiliency is not cheap, I can tell you that. Obviously, we have a lot of architectures to redesign so that they are more resilient. But I think the Space Development Agency is a perfect example where they are moving fast. We have the funding we need to put Tranche 2 in orbit. That'll give us an initial operational capability that demonstrates that kind of resiliency.
And are there quite a few private companies that are willing to put their money at risk to try to put systems up that you can work with?
I can't really speak to what their risk tolerance is, but I can tell you there's a great interest in the commercial sector to engage with the government.
All right. I want to thank each of you for your service. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Senator Rosen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'd also like to thank Secretary Mink, General Alvin, General Saltzman for testifying today for your service to our country. And General Alvin, thank you for taking the time to meet with me last week. I really appreciated our conversation ahead of this hearing, and I'm going to continue the discussion we had with both you and Secretary Mink on documenting exposure at classified locations. Excuse me. At General Kane's confirmation hearing, I raised the issue of documenting exposure at data masked locations where the duty station and even its existence are classified. This is to ensure that service members' records are accurately, they reflect the service-connected injuries incurred at those sites. I've heard from constituents who have served at such locations within the Nevada test and training range. They believe they were exposed to radiation from our days of conducting explosive nuclear weapons testing, and in addition to toxins from burn pits, which disposed of classified waste. However, DOD does not classify the range as a place where exposure occurred, despite the Department of Energy providing a presumption of exposure for their personnel who served at these exact same locations within the range, such as the Tonopah Test Range. And because their service is data masked, these veterans can't even prove to the VA that they were ever actually stationed there. Imagine that. So all of this has prevented them from being able to receive the veterans' benefits they deserve. So to Secretary Mink and General Alvin, I have a little bit more on this, so if you'll be brief, will you work with me to ensure that this committee, to ensure the Department of the Air Force provides a presumptive exposure at relevant Air Force locations, and where the Department of Energy has done so for their personnel, we want to ensure that those who serve there, currently serving at these sites, receive sufficient documentation to support their health-related claims, all while still being able to protect the classified nature of their service. Secretary.
Yes, Senator, we take our health of our workforce seriously, and we need to deal with this issue.
Thank you. Department of Energy has. General.
Absolutely, Senator. I would say that I don't know whether the Department of Air Force can do its own policy, but we certainly would be within the Department of Defense policy. We need to work. What I need to make sure of on the Air Force side is if it's determined that airmen, past or present, are qualified for those, they shouldn't be restricted from that because of the process and the process of being the data masked.
Well,
that's something we need to work through.
I have a solution. So you've teed me up for my next question, because specifically, will you ensure, both of you, that your staff meets with my staff and the committee staff in the next few weeks so that we can ensure, correct this issue in the FY26 NDAA? We think that there's a fix for this.
Senator, obviously, I'll defer to my secretary, but I think this is something, that part is easily done to understand that once they're deemed qualified, we need to ensure that our process doesn't restrict them because of our.
There's a template there that DOE's been using for years. So
We're happy to meet with your staff, Senator.
thank you. I appreciate it. I want to talk a little bit about CCAs and the future of Creech. So General Alvin, with the arrival of Experimental Operations Unit at Creech Air Force Base and the future deployment of the Collaborative Combat Aircraft, CCA, if they're to be permanently based at Creech, which I'm really hopeful for, I'm curious what investments will be made to address housing deficiencies and support services in the area. Creech is remote, limited housing, limited services nearby, and airmen have to commute so many miles to the base from where they live. It's even longer commute for those folks who have kids, have to drop them off to daycare, drive an hour to work, and Nellis Air Force Base, and so it's on the opposite, Nellis is on the opposite end of the Las Vegas Valley, excuse me. So if CCAs are to be permanent, based at Creech, what does the future of the base infrastructure look like, and how can we help support our personnel there, please?
Thank you, Senator. And of course, we're very excited about the Collaborative Combat Aircraft, what it means for the future of our Air Force. And Creech is a natural location, not only because of the community support there, but also because of the range. But to your point, we do need to ensure that a place that can already be challenging for the airmen who serve there now, as we add more airmen in, we need to make sure they're well cared for. And so we have a site activation task force that's going there now and assessing all of the needs to everything from, as you mentioned, the child care, making sure we have a better process and more rapidly expand the family child care, because some of the, between the RPA pilots who now operate on off hours and what that might mean in the future for CCA, we need to make sure we have a more robust capability to take care of the families. Site Activation Task Force should be there. The Experimental Operations Unit will also be able to give us a sense of how many we think long-term, because this is really, we're uncovering new ground here. But between the Site Activation Task Force and the first months and years of the Experimental Operation Unit, we should understand, sort of have a bracket about what it really takes to take care of those airmen. We're committed to do that.
Well, perfect. I'll look forward to scheduling a meeting. I want to talk about infrastructure adaptations, airspace control, and electromagnetic spectrum availability. Thank you. Thank you.
Senator Tuberville.
Good morning, gentlemen. How are you? Army just released its transition initiative to prepare for future threats and budgets. This is for all three of you, if you wanted time just to answer it. Kind of three-part question. Does this have any impact on your organization? Do you anticipate similar initiatives in your organization? And when and what will they look like? General Saltzman?
Yes, sir, there's some connections. I actually been charged by Congress to be the force design architect for space for the armed forces. And so as the Army goes through its transformation to figure out exactly how it will use space capabilities to protect its organic maneuver forces, we'll be connected to that as well to make sure we're sharing technology, we're not being redundant where we don't need to be. So there'll be an overarching aspect to that. But in a broader sense, we're also using this year to build the objective force of the Space Force. What do we need to look like in the next 10, 15 years, and how will that connect to the other services to make sure that all of the joint force requirements are met?
How's that communication? Does it work pretty well?
Between the services?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. We collaborate through the joint staff in a lot of places, but the JROC is where we share requirements across the services. We do it at the working group level all the way up to the four-star generals.
Mr. Secretary, since you've been here for about 48 hours, what's your thought?
First off, I'd have to agree with General Saltzman. Yeah, I haven't had a chance to read their transition plan in detail, but at a high level, a lot of things are focusing on long-range fires, things like that under that threat environment. Those are the same things we're having to deal with. So there's a lot of connectivity there. And in many cases, what both the Space Force delivers and the Air Force delivers from an ISR and other capability for targeting is critical for the Army, as it is for the entire Joint Force.
Yeah, if anybody's got to switch gears, it's got to be you guys, you know, for what we've seen and the things that China's doing. General, your thoughts?
Very well aligned, Senator. I think as the Army goes through their transformation initiative, as with all the services, we need to make sure we don't do it in a vacuum. Understanding that as the Army transforms, we're going to be dependent on them and them on us for base resiliency in the Indo-Pacific. As they look to sort of streamline some of their ways to do acquisition, consistent with some of the basic tenets of the Forged Act, those sort of things, we want to make sure that we're integrated there. And I think we have been undergoing a bit of that ourselves with the way we're developing our new force design, not only what we're building, but how we're building it. And I think having those common practices and the collaboration between the services, as Salty said, is going to be key going forward.
Thank you. Since you're on a roll, I'll stay with you, General. We'll go back to KC-46. I think we have availability around 90 now of KC-46. Is that correct?
I think we're 89 on the ramp, yes.
Yeah. What is their availability? I mean, since they're new, we've heard the problems that they're having up and down, and some are in and out of service. What's their availability?
See, I knew I was going to be asked this, so I can't remember them all. So I have it right here. The KC-46 availability right now is just at 51%. So, and the challenges with that, there are several challenges.
51?
Yeah, 51%. And that includes those that are in the depot maintenance. And so, again, that is not a number that we're proud of. There are several issues that we have been working through with Boeing to help ensure that we deliver combat-capable jets right off the ramp or off the production line. So there are still some deficiency reports that we're sorting through with Boeing, having to do with the upgraded remote visualization system and drain lines and those sort of things. But right now, the 52% is where we're at.
Does that have the capability that we need for the Indo-Pacific in terms of what it can carry, the range?
It actually does, Senator. It's actually quite a capable platform, as it's available. one thing we are looking at into the future is not just the amount of gas that it carries, but as we go forward into the next decade or so, we need to ensure that we enhance their survivability, whether that be with onboard systems or with offboard support. Going into the future, it's not just the tyranny of distance, which is extant, but it will be also the tyranny of operating consistently in a more contested environment. And so as we move forward into the next generation aerial refueling system examination, we are looking what the next capabilities will be, whether it's a new platform or more defensive systems on the current character platform.
So we're looking for new capabilities, not just sitting around thinking the KC-46 is going to be the
We are. As we look in the most important thing is the continued recapitalization of the KC-135, which, as I mentioned, average KC-135 age is older than me. And so a 63-year-old average jet is not something that we want to continue to try and discover new parts that break. So in the immediate future, the capacity and the capability of the KC-46 is sufficient. And as we're looking for long-term, we want to make sure that in the next couple of decades, we can have more survivable tanking capability.
Thank you. I had the opportunity to fly around the world in a KC-135 with a bunch of other coaches at one time. Damn near froze to death.
Did you refuel another aircraft? Did you get to do that?
We did.
All right.
Yeah, we did. Antiquated is my explanation for that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, the environmental controls in the back of a 135 are not awesome. Yeah.
General Alvin, don't sell yourself short at age 63. Senator Gillibrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Mink, the Space Force, NRO, NGA are working to establish the policies and procedures that will guide the DoD's use of space-based tactical ISRT. Now that you are Secretary, what is your assessment of this progress, and do you believe, what do you believe must still be resolved?
I didn't say that.
I think at a high level, the agreement on how we're going to allocate resources and allow for commanders to task and get what they need. I'm talking about the commanders. I think that's all laid flat. Now, I think the devil's in the details, so how you actually do that, right? We're just starting to field capability now and starting to do experimentation with that now and fielding tools to allow that to happen. There's obviously still a lot of work to go, but I think there's been great progress made. And the fact that we already have systems that we can start doing testing with and start doing exercising, support Indo-PACOM and other theaters will be critically important. I guess I'd lead General Saltzman if he has any additional comments.
The TAC SRT is an important capability that we've offered to the combatant commands. It fills a niche where you have unclassified capabilities that can get quickly into the planner's hands. It's intended to complement what the intelligence community, NRO and NGA, provide to combatant commanders writ large. Admiral Whitworth and I have been working very closely. We have working group level discussions. We're refining the procedures and policies to make sure there's not overlap, there's not too much redundancy. We don't want to pay for imagery twice, for example. And I hope later this week to be able to sign a memorandum of understanding that outlines those procedures, and we'll be in a much better place.
Thank you, General Saltzman. Last week, in the testimony before the House Armed Services Committee, it was revealed that Space Force will lose about 10% of its civilian workforce. For the service that is already lean and by many accounts should be growing, how will this loss of these civilian professionals impact Guardians and the Space Force's mission?
Thank you, Senator. We rely heavily on our civilian workforce. They bring expertise that we don't have in the active duty. They bring corporate continuity across all of our processes and procedures. 10%, although the raw numbers might be kind of small, 10% is a large hit. And obviously, we use a lot of our civilian workforce in the acquisition of our systems, which is a critical capability that we bring. So I'm worried about replacing that level of expertise in the near term as we try to resolve it and make sure we have a good workforce doing that acquisition work.
And General Saltzman, you and I have talked about the Cyber Academy and how important it is to train young people to do some of these civilian jobs and to make sure that they can aspire to be in the Space Force and to aspire to be in the DoD in different capacities as civilians. We've heard recent reports that because of the hiring freeze, that these young graduates from the Cyber Academy aren't able to get the jobs that they need to enter into Space Force, NRO, NGA, not NGA, that's the National Governors Association, yeah, NGA, are unable to do that. Do you have any insight into what we can do to unstick that pipeline that we're so desperate to try to grow?
Well, we were in a period of managed growth. The civilian workforce by the end of '25 was supposed to be almost 1,000 larger than it's going to end up being. That's a part of not just the incentives that we've given for people to resign or retire early. We've also we kind of stopped the growth that we had planned to accomplish these missions. And cyber defense is a perfect example of one of those missions that we've suspended hiring until we figure out exactly what the size of the civilian workforce is going to be, and then we will rebalance the force. Cyber is not going to go away. We need to make sure we're recruiting those people because that's a skill set we desperately need.
And General, do you know how long it will take to finish the assessment of the numbers of who you have and what you have and rebalancing the force? How long might that take? Because again, one of the challenges that we created the Cyber Academy to address is that onboarding took so long for organizations like NRO or CIA or other capacities that rely on cyber-heavy skill sets, that we would lose these extraordinarily gifted young people to the private sector. We've created the Cyber Academy specifically to ramp them on to public service. So there's an urgency, and if you have any estimate in times or any ways that you would suggest to the administration that we could maybe surge resources to get this done sooner than later.
I was really proud at how fast we were able to onboard our civilian hires. I thought the Space Force had done a nice job of reducing that timeline. The DoD is really looking at what the size of the civilian workforce is. And so as those incentives to reshape the workforce affect the Space Force, I'm not sure exactly where we're going to end up, what our final size is going to be. As soon as I understand what that size is, then we will redistribute and reallocate the civilian workforce as necessary.
Thank you. Thank you all for your service.
Thank you, Senator Gillibrand. Senator Budd, you're recognized, and you have the gavel for 5 minutes.
Understood. Thank you, sir. Again, thank you all for being here. I want to thank you in particular for your leadership, General Alvin, with communicating the need for more Air Force. It's something that I support and something that I agree with. You know, last month we received the Air Force's report to Congress, which lays out the plan to sustain and recapitalize the fighter fleet. The plan goes out, as you know, to 2035, and it hinges on production and procurement assumptions over the next 10 years in order to work. So in that sense, how important are the fighter production lines and stable funding to those lines in your effort to modernize the fleet?
You nailed it, Senator Budd. They're absolutely critical. That stable funding helps us not only understand how to develop the pilot pipeline, but where they're going to be stationed, the whole thing. It's critical.
So one thing that stuck out to me was the arrival of the F-35s at Lakenheath Air Base, in that once they're up and running, 2 Strike Eagle units will be returning stateside. So has a decision been made on where those aircraft will end up?
Senator, the final decision hasn't been made, but I will tell you that when we're looking at the right place to have them land, we are looking at, because those have the newer 229 engines in them, and so they're the more modern.
Versus the 220 engines.
Versus the 220 engines, and so understanding Seymour Johnson has the 220s, we're looking very closely at the opportunity because, of course, Seymour Johnson is going to be critical to the F-15E and EX community as far as the training unit and the operational unit for the E. So that certainly is it's an attractive landing spot right now. We haven't made that final decision, but it's pretty attractive.
General, as you know, Seymour Johnson, which you mentioned, it hosts both combat and training missions, and it's home to the oldest Strike Eagles in the fleet. So does the return of those Lakenheath jets, does it create flexibility for managing the F-15 fleet and keeping those missions alive?
It absolutely does, Senator. It does.
So if you were able to divest those oldest jets, those Dash 220 jets at Seymour Johnson, unencumbered by the current law, and replace them with newer ones, does that make it easier to sustain both the combat and the training missions at Seymour Johnson?
That absolutely does. It does, Senator.
Thank you. Now, I want to be supportive, and if there's common sense decisions that are held up by technicalities or factors outside of your control, I want to hear about it, and I'm willing to work with all of you on that.
Thank you, sir.
Secretary Mink, again, congratulations on your new role, your swearing in. So what can you tell us about the plan to re-optimize the Air Force for great power competition?
So I think it's kind of, as I mentioned in my opening comments, I think there's two things we have to look at. Is, we have to look at the near-term Indo-Pacific theater and what we need to do there, and we've talked a little bit about that from a readiness perspective, how we're flowing more capability out there and dispersing that capability. I think in the near term, that is something we have to worry about. At the same time, the various modernization efforts we have going on across the service to be able to push deeper in there as China fields more and more capability. I think we talk a lot about modernization, but one of the things can maybe talk a little bit more about in this meeting is that in some cases, particularly in the Space Force, it's not just modernization, it's creation, right? It's new mission that we're not just modernizing. These are new missions that did not exist 4 or 5 years ago, right? So we're creating new missions, and that has to be done because of those capabilities, those new missions are going to be critical, both in the Golden Dome for America, but also in the competition with China and other potential adversaries. So it's a mix of both of those things. It's maintaining readiness now. It's making sure our modernization and the creation missions we're creating are on schedule and deliver, and that's going to be a focus of mine. Is just execution. Have to execute to get those systems online.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. General Alvin, back to you. I'm interested in the deployable combat wing concept. It makes a lot of sense for a wing to train as a unit and then be able to deploy and fight together as a unit if called upon. As one of the first deployable combat wings, I'm particularly interested in what this means for Seymour Johnson. So will additional airmen need to be stationed there to support this concept?
Yeah, Senator, they will, because when we do that, when we ensure we have sequestered those to train as units to go and train how they may have to fight, we still need to ensure that the base is still taken care of. So we anticipate about 200 or folks or so more airmen coming in, and we have done sort of an advanced team to go and look and to ensure that everything is taken care of with the ability to house and feed and do all that sort of things with those additional airmen. I got to tell you, when we put out the call for airmen to volunteer to go to these deployable combat wings, we flooded the zone. There was a lot of airmen who are very excited about this concept, see themselves, rather than deploying as individuals, training as units and deploying as units. And I think Seymour Johnson is going to be the great recipient of that and as sort of leading the charge for how the Air Force is going to do going forward. We're very excited.
Thank you, General. Chairman.
Yes, before I recognize Senator Duckworth, let's say this. We're going to get to everybody, but we're going to reconvene in the Senate Visitor Center, room 217, at 12:25. So people should be advised, and staff members should be advised. Senate Visitor Center, 217, 12:25. Senator Duckworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. Senator Hirono touched on this Qatari gift plane, and I wanted to follow up on it. Look, the bipartisan concern expressed in the lead up to and during today's hearing simply underscores how bizarre and disturbing it was to watch President Trump proudly defend his decision to create, at the very least, the pathetic appearance that our commander-in-chief can be bought by an ally of Iran and Hamas, all for the price of the Qatari royal family's luxury so-called palace in the sky. And that doesn't even address the outrageous reality that far from saving money, this unconstitutional action will not only cost our nation its dignity, but it will force taxpayers to waste over $1 billion in taxpayer dollars to overhaul this particular aircraft when we currently have not one, but two fully operational and fully capable Air Force One aircraft. Secretary Mink, I wrote a letter to you last week about the very real operational security risks involved in President Trump's unconstitutional proposal to accept a $400 million luxury aircraft from the Qatari royal family and retrofit it to serve as Air Force One. And I look forward to hearing from you and hearing your thorough response about what the Air Force has been directed to do to support this. But I have several questions for you here today. As you know, any platform used for presidential travel must be fully secure, survivable, and this is the important part, capable of supporting uninterrupted command and control under the most demanding conditions, including in the event of a nuclear crisis. This isn't just about ensuring presidential protection, though that is very important. This is about our national security and protecting all Americans from the dangers posed if the president's sensitive communications are intercepted or if he is out of contact, God forbid, with our nation's military during a crisis. Secretary Mink, General Alvin, do you concur that the upgrades required for a foreign-provided plane to meet the operational security standards of Air Force One would be significant?
Senator, thanks for the question. So the Secretary of Defense has directed the Air Force to basically start planning to modify the aircraft. We are postured to do that.
That's not my question. My question is, will you concur?
We will look at all of those. We will look at all of those. Well, we will have to look at all of those issues you just addressed in those modifications, Senator.
General Alvin, would you say that to upgrade a foreign aircraft to Air Force One standards would require significant modifications?
I align myself with the Secretary's opinion that we will be postured to make the modifications necessary.
That's not my question. My question is, do you concur that it would take significant modifications to take a civilian 747 and upgrade it to Air Force One standards?
So Senator, any civilian aircraft will take significant modifications to do so. And as I said, based on the Secretary's direction, we are postured and we're off looking at that right now, what it's going to take for that particular aircraft, right?
All right. If President Trump insists on converting this plane to a hardened Air Force One before 2029, I worry about the pressures you may be under to cut corners on operational security. I've already seen concerning press reports that requirements have been loosened for construction of 2 other Boeing 747-8s intended to modernize the Air Force One fleet that taxpayers have already been paying for to accelerate this delivery. Can I have your commitment, Mr. Secretary, that you will strongly advise the President against cutting any corners or reducing any requirements on operational security standards for any aircraft to be used as Air Force One?
So, Senator, I'm unaware of any requirements. Now, I've only been in the job 2 days, but I'm unaware of any requirement changes to the current program. And yes, we will, as we lay out the plan, we will make sure that we do what's necessary to ensure security of the aircraft. Right?
Do I have your commitment that you will advise the President not to reduce any requirements that will lower operational security for any aircraft to be used as Air Force One?
Yeah, Senator, I will be quite clear and discuss that with the Secretary up to the President if necessary if we feel there's any threats that we are unable to address.
If the President insists on this dangerous course of action, I urge you not to let this distraction, and it is a distraction, divert resources that would otherwise support delivering the 2 aircraft already under contract and paid for by American taxpayers in a manner consistent with our critical security standards to protect Air Force One from compromise, disruption, or attack. Thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would note, though, by the way, that Joe Biden designated Qatar as a major non-NATO ally, but here we are. General Alvin, I want to ask you a couple questions about sort of the changing on the battlefield, the use of drones, unmanned support. And there's a lot of conversation and discussion about that being for 5th gen and 6th gen platforms, F-47s, which we're very happy about in St. Louis. Will CCA be able to integrate, in your view, with sort of 4.5 generation platforms like the F-15EX? Is that something you contemplate?
You use the right term. We're definitely contemplating at the threshold platform that we're looking for right now to be able to have those 2, which, by the way, we have 2 of them that are prototyping very strongly right now to integrate with the F-35 and the F-22, and obviously it'll be sort of born to integrate with the F-47. Some of that we will look at the integration challenges and opportunities to go back with the 4.5th gen, but the more we can, the better, because the sooner we start our Air Force on this human-machine teaming piece, the better off we're going to be as far as better cost exchange ratios, as well as better combat capability.
Dr. Mink, I wanted to ask you, we've heard a bunch of times, and I think it's pretty well known, the role the legacy F-15E has played in recent operations in the Red Sea. Still incredibly valuable, still very important. Would you still agree, and there's a balancing act here, right? It's the F-47 is the future, but we have these, legacy platforms. Would you agree, though, they still play a very, very important role?
Yes, Senator. It's been demonstrated time and time again that those platforms are very effective and provide significant combat capability. Obviously, there are areas where they are challenged, right, and would not be the primary, but that doesn't mean they don't provide operational capability in many cases.
And I want to ask you something that obviously plays into the our national defense, but somewhat parochial. At Whiteman Air Force Base, we're the B-2, we've got the B-21, obviously on its way. You've got the A-10 that's being phased out, and that's coming pretty quickly now. That the F-15E could be a suitable bridge before you have a longer-term solution like the F-15EX as a follow-on mission there. Dr. Meek. Maybe.
Oh, go ahead. So I think that's one of the location that's on the list for competing for future fighter wings. Yes, Senator.
General Alvin, would you agree with that?
I would. I think I'm really in close contact with Lieutenant General John Healy, too, the Air Force Reserve Command Commander, and looking at opportunities for, staying in the global strike community, the B-2, B-21, and how many we're going to buy of those, and is there a better association there? But specifically to the A-10, well, more resources available, that's where we look at where we might be able to place and offset the loss of the A-10. Those are all things that, more Air Force, we might be able to pursue.
One of the and I wanted to speak with you, and we'll have plenty of conversations, General Alvin, about this, I think, down the road, but was disappointed that the 139th Airlift Wing did not get the C-130Js. It's been St. Joe's ready. They do, ironically, do the training for other, like when the country of India comes in to train on the C-130Js, they do the training for the C-130Js, but do not have the C-130Js. I'm not going to put you on the spot right now on this, but we thought it was going to happen this go around. Will you commit to working with me to make sure that actually we land that plane?
Senator, 100%. What we do, what we can provide to you is an understanding of where the areas were, where it didn't compete well and where it did compete well. That's what we try and do it with all of these when we go from the enterprise definition to the candidate location to the preferred location, to be able to understand where some of those discriminators were and give you a sense of, hey, if there's something that might make this particular location more competitive next time around, this is where it might be. I think we owe you that, and we'll certainly be happy to do
Well, I look forward to doing that again because we took those comments to heart and I think addressed those issues, but we'll continue to work with you. Thanks for your service. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Schmidt. Senator Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wasn't going to ask about this, but General Alvin, the dumbing down of the conversation about the Air Force One from Qatar, I think deserves some more attention. Can you talk about whether it's a domestically made aircraft or an aircraft that is gifted to us from Qatar, wherever that aircraft might come from, there would be major security protocols before the commander-in-chief would fly on that airplane. Isn't that correct?
Yes, Senator, that's correct. And I think if it's possible, because of anytime we're talking about things having to do with the security of the commander-in-chief, if we can do that at the closed session, there are many more things.
Totally understand, but the public deserves to know that major security protocols would happen no matter where the plane comes from.
Yes, Senator.
Right, and the public can be assured of that being the case because the United States Air Force isn't going to allow the President of the United States to fly on a plane that isn't secure.
Yes, Senator, we will comply with the requirements for his security and all those that are given to us by the White House.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Secretary, we've talked about this before, but can you talk about just how important the Air National Guard and the Air Force Reserves are to you in this administration and what kind of goals we have over the next 4 years to strengthen those important institutions might be?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Before I do that, I just want to make sure that this airplane was the one that we're talking about here was actually domestically produced. That
Understood.
It is a 747
Right.
platform.
Understood.
Just like the current platforms are. Yeah, with respect to the Air National Guards and Air Reserves, yeah, I actually was in the reserves, so I'm have a long history of working in that environment. I think it's critical across the board. I think we've already had a number of discussions where additional aircraft are either being aircraft are being modernized within the Guard and Reserve Force, and or new aircraft are being brought into the Guard and Reserve. So yeah, it has always been and will continue to be a key part of the Department of the Air Force's strength combat capability. As you know, from the Space Force perspective, there's a lot of transition going on. General Saltzman maybe talk to that a little bit.
Yeah, in accordance with the NDAA, the transfer of the space capabilities that are in the Air National Guard are going to flow into the Space Force, and we're working on all the planning because those capabilities are critical. The work that's being done, both in the Air Force Reserve and the Air National Guard for space is critical.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Last month, as you know, the president came to the Midwest, and he spoke at Selfridge Air National Guard Base, as Senator Slotkin alluded to a moment ago, and he said, quote, "The previous administration was willing to surrender Air National Guard fighter units across the country by retiring aircraft that were not being replaced. But under the Trump administration, we're correcting that injustice." Mr. Secretary, can you talk about the president's direction on the need to invest more in these Air National Guard fighter units, which are important to me, whether it's Michigan or Indiana or across the country? Can you talk about what that investment looks like?
Yeah, I mean, I think that and many of the other president's comments kind of reiterate his perspective on the importance of bringing more air combat power into the service, and as General Alvin has been championing. So I think, as we bring more of those combat capability in, as we build out more aircraft, both in the active duty units, but also in the reserve units and guard units, that will be critical to get those platforms into those locations.
And General Alvin, as we see this investment and the focus by this administration, what should Air Guard units around the country be doing at the moment to prepare for the future? Even though there might be a transition to a F-15s in Michigan or F-16s in Indiana, what does an Air National Guard base need to do now to prepare for F-35s, F-47s down the road?
Senator, I'd say the short answer to that is really what they have been doing, which is ensuring that they maintain the quality of their aircrew, the quality of the maintenance, the quality of the support that has made them an integral part of our ability to deploy and fight overseas for the last, quarter century and before. So I think the Air National Guard, and of course working as a total force, because we are a total force, they continue to integrate into our deployment scheme. The Air National Guard is integrating into our new deployable combat wing scheme. So they are, much like the Air Force Reserves, they are transforming right along with the rest of the Air Force. And as we do that, then we're able to have a more balanced and even approach to modernizing our Air Force. I think they're doing all the right things.
Appreciate that very much. I yield back.
Thank you, Senator. This concludes what I would say has been a very informative, open portion of today's hearing. I want to thank our witnesses for their testimony. For the information of members, questions for the record will be due to the committee within 2 business days of the conclusion of the hearing. We will commence the closed portion of this hearing in Senate Security at 12:25.